David Ricciardi took a very direct path to becoming a novelist. One day, he just decided it was time to write a book. Initially self-published, his first novel, Warning Light, quickly caught the eye of editor Tom Colgan and was soon one of the hottest debut thrillers, garnering praise from Lee Child, Steve Berry, and Mark Graney, who called it a blazing thriller with relentless pace and impressive detail. His sophomore effort, Rogue Strike, kept up his debut's breakneck pace, placing his protagonist Jake Keller in the crosshairs not just of Middle Eastern terrorists, but the same U.S. government he serves. There is no time to catch your breath because each chapter explodes with action, raved the New York Journal of Books. Now, in Ricciardi's thrilling third novel, Black Flag, Keller finds himself on the trail of a pirate mastermind in Somalia. With threats coming from all directions and trust in short supply, Keller must once again rely on the one person who has never let him down, himself. An avid outdoorsman and sailor, Ricciardi infuses his stories with a rugged authenticity that keeps readers coming back for more.
Hi, this is David Ricciardi, and if you're not, you should absolutely be watching the Crew reviews. They're the most entertaining reviews on the internet.
Boys,
here we are.
Gentlemen,
David,
cheers.
Welcome to the show, David.
Pleased to be here.
So listen, brother, Black Flag is the third novel in the Jake Keller series. Your debut, Warning Light, you took readers from Iran across Europe. Then in Rogue Strike, you dumped Jake in Yemen. He'd fight his way through some crazy stuff, Libya and whatnot. So why don't you tell us and the audience, where's Jake headed this time around?
So in Black Flag, he spends the bulk of it in the Horn of Africa. The whole concept behind the book is that, piracy, which had been a real big problem in Somalia years and years ago, and pretty much eradicated by 2015 through the efforts of the shipping companies and the world's navies, has made a comeback as the criminals have gotten smarter and smarter. And as you undoubtedly know, nobody likes a smart criminal. But these guys have upped their game, and they're more like a SEAL team now than a bunch of guys running around in a little skiff with an outboard engine and a couple AK-47s. So it's added a whole new depth to the problem.
Who doesn't like pirates?
Arr.
David,
Okay.
you actually almost answered my specific question.
I know.
They're no longer poor kids running around with AK-47s. So tell me a little bit about how you found out about the new sophistication of the pirates, and where is that training coming from? Is it mercenaries, or what? How is that happening, and what led you to that storyline?
So, as you guys well know, there's been a massive surge in special operations forces around the world since the war on terror started. And some of these guys are going to age out. Some of these guys are just going to, leave the service. Some are going to want to go back and contractor work. So, there's a huge pool of veterans and a smaller pool of special operations veterans, but they're out there. And I said, okay, well, what if some enterprising, highly organized, well-funded individual started hiring a few guys who had some blemishes on their records, put them together with some, decent black market weapons and some top-tier training, and just used it for evil instead of good. And that's where we are.
That's how the show started. I think it was just evil.
There's no alcohol involved in this, though.
Oh, forget it then. You have this new character, Badid, in Black Flag. He's a lifelong Somali pirate who had a successful raid when he was 13 years old, which kind of kicked off his career. So it's easy enough for us to see, how extreme poverty and lack of opportunity gives rise to these criminals. Anything that you came across in your research or writing offered any answers to an antidote to piracy? Or is it really just the most effective countermeasure is just a show of strength and will of force?
So, going back to Badid and his origins and the way piracy got going is so that there was colonial colonial dominance of most of the Horn of Africa, much of Africa, in fact, for hundreds of years. And the Somalis, when the European, colonialists left, there was a lot of poverty in there. They hadn't been used to running the country on their own. There was still a lot of exploitation of the country, and especially the fishing grounds. So the colonials left the land, but they still were fishing offshore, and the waters off the Horn of Africa are super plentiful. So anyway, so the Somalis, who were destitute and super poor and went through famine after famine caused by drought, they saw all this commerce passing by just offshore, literally just offshore, and said, hey, we deserve that. So culturally, they just see piracy as their entitlement, and say, hey, look, we're just getting some of what we're owed.
Okay.
Well, and again, this is kind of in the weeds, but economically, like what can be done? Is it similar to like the gangs that deal drugs in the inner cities, where it's very hard to offer them an alternate path that is lucrative enough for them to step away from the crime?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, economic opportunity is the solution to many of the world's evils. And I would say it's probably outside my depth as to what's going to fix it in Somalia. But that's definitely what has given like, if you read the book, you obviously know that the whole country is just a lawless mess.
Yeah.
And that's given rise to all sorts of criminal activity, not just piracy, but, extortion, prostitution, you name it. You can think of it, and it's being done in Somalia.
Right.
It's just separated whole, the government, everything's corrupt down there. So
yeah, right. So it's a way of life now.
Yeah.
Tribalism too. Yeah.
David, you didn't necessarily come from a literary background, and we've heard this story that one day you just simply decided you were going to write a book. And just like that warning light, a spectacular debut came into existence. So where did the impetus for that decision come from?
No, I appreciate it. I had always enjoyed creative writing, but I hadn't done any of it since I was in college last century. And, I have a couple of adult kids now, and my wife had started a nonprofit about 12 years ago. And I actually had some free time for the first time in, 20 plus years. And I said, hey, you know what? I've always wanted to do some writing. I had a bunch of ideas kicking around in my head. And I did a little research into how to write. And I knew what genre it was going to be. I knew what the storyline was roughly going to be. And I just sat down and I banged it out. Relied on a few friends for some technical guidance. And then another friend helped me self-publish it. That ended up falling into the hands of a guy who put out about 8 novels in the 1980s. And he was in his 70s, and he said, hey, I loved your book. He called me up one night out of the blue, loved your book, thought it was fantastic, and hit some real specific points, like that you could tell he had been a professional writer. Yeah. And he said, it was just great. I goes, I hope you don't mind, but I gave it to a friend of mine from high school. And I'm thinking, all right, I wish he bought his own copy, but, this guy's in his 70s, maybe he's on a fixed income, so on and so forth. So, yeah. And I said, hey, great. I hope he loves it. And he said, well, he's already read it, and he did love it. And, oh, by the way, he used to be CEO of Simon & Schuster, and he wants to talk to you.
Oh, jeez.
So I said, all right, cool. I'll see if I can fit him in.
Next Tuesday's fine.
Yeah, it was. I spoke to him literally the next day, and he was like a Marine Corps drill sergeant. The first 10 minutes, he told me everything I did wrong, just tore me apart. And then he spent the next 50 minutes telling me all the potential the book had, all the things he really liked about it. And he's like, "Who's your agent?" I'm like, "I don't have an agent." This was like a. I was going to stick this in a drawer until a couple of my friends of mine showed me how to self-publish it. And so he said, "Okay, talk to this guy." if he doesn't call you back, let me know. So I talked to that guy. I sent him an electronic copy and a paperback copy. And he called me back. He's based up in Boston, but he was down in New York City the following Friday. We had lunch, hit it off, signed him up, and we hired a professional on his recommendation. I hired a professional editor, and she helped me out, polish it up a little bit. And then he started sending it out, and Tom Colgan picked it up. And when I looked up his background, I thought, gee, there could be no better guy for my style of writing.
No kidding.
Than Tom.
Jackpot.
And he's just a great guy.
Yeah.
So, win-win. I realize how incredibly fortunate I am. And I know a lot of people who probably have more talent than I have labored for a long time. But a lot of things worked out in pretty short order for me, and I'm incredibly grateful.
Yeah, that's just
a
not
lot
the
of people
normal way. Yeah.
Yeah, I try not to tell a lot of people that story, but I guess everybody's going to hear it now.
But let's repeat that story. I got a book behind me that you could probably do that with. So
yeah. I think it's great that the CEO of Simon Schuster tore you down to build you back up.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a great guy. We've had dinner since. I keep him in touch. He gives me feedback. He's given me feedback on the subsequent books.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and he retired years ago, so he's not there anymore. But
That's
were
awesome.
there any hookups though, or holdups because you had self-published it at first?
Right.
My agent was a little concerned about it,
Right.
but Berkeley and Tom were not.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. My agent, as soon as I signed with him, he said, "Look, it's your book. You can do whatever you want." He said, "My advice would be take it down immediately." So I took it down immediately.
Yeah. Man,
What a cool story.
that is a very cool story. I'm a little jealous, but it's a very cool story. Your main protagonist, Jake Keller, he's a CIA SAD paramilitary officer, special activities guy, with a plethora of similar background characters in the genre. How did you go about setting him apart from the other characters populating all the bookshelves out there?
Yeah, great question. Like, in my mind, what defines Jake is just his tenacity. He's not super skilled at any one thing. He's not an assassin. He came out from kind of a regular guy background. I mean, there was a threshold test that I used and probably exceeded a few times for when I was putting together the action and warning light. And it was, all right, in my prime, in my peak, I should be able to do everything that he's doing. And some of the things were, probably a little bit of a stretch. But I wanted him to be a regular guy because I wanted people to potentially identify with him and say, okay, especially in warning light, what if I were in this situation? What if my plane landed in a hostile country? I was on my way from London to Singapore, and all of a sudden we have an engine problem and we land in Iran, and I get arrested as a spy. What the hell am I going to do? And I wanted people to say, okay, how ready are we? Because we've gotten soft as a society, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, we're super soft as a society.
Yeah.
And I thought, like, okay, I'm an outdoorsy guy, so I incorporated a lot of my personal experiences into writing the book.
Yeah.
We're finding out how soft we are as a society right now.
Yeah, right. Amazon's taking 10 days. What the hell?
How can I live like this?
That's so true. I'm falling into that.
Exactly.
May 23rd. I'm not getting what?
Earlier, you mentioned you consulted with some friends on when you were writing your book, and that's kind of what I want to get at. The level of detail in your books makes it obvious you're a big researcher. So, given the circumstances surrounding your jump into fiction, how are you able to build such an impressive network of sources that talk about the ins and outs of intelligence, of military, of diplomacy, of law enforcement? Your detail is pretty strong, and that's tough to build. So how'd you do it?
So it's a great question. I've been incredibly fortunate in that I've never had to approach a source cold. All of my sources have been friends or friends of friends. So I have friends in, diplomatic corps, intelligence community, military, you name it, Army, Navy, Air Force, friend of pilots and things like that. So I I've been really, really fortunate in that I'm usually able to make a single phone call to one of my sources and say, "Hey, how would we do this?" and get a pretty detailed description. You know, I mean, I sat down with a buddy of mine at my kitchen table once for about 4 hours, and we went through some super technical stuff. And at the end of it, I'm like, "This is amazing," and he's like, "No, you can't use any of that. That's all classified."
I was just about to say what?
So I'm like,
but thanks for the beer.
and one of the things I have done with the friends of friends, and with the friends, you know, they obviously know they can trust me. With the friends of friends, is anybody that I've sat down and talked with, I've given them veto power over anything, and I've sent them the final manuscript. And I said, look, if there's anything in here, whether you gave it to me or I got it someplace else, or I interpolated it from like open source intelligence that makes you uncomfortable, we'll pull it out. And I hit that point with one of the Delta Force guys who worked with me on Rogue Strike. And he said, you know, I'm not comfortable. I don't know where you got that. He said, but I'm not comfortable that being in the book. And I said, great. So we just took it right out. And, you know, no harm, no foul. But, you know, I don't want to put anybody in harm's way. And, you know, these guys, this is a good way to get them to trust me.
Yeah, it's huge.
So, you know, just give them veto power and we're all good. I'd rather, and what I told them, I said, I'd rather omit something or intentionally do it incorrectly than just get it plain wrong. I was reading a book one time a couple of years ago by author who should remain unnamed, but he talked about his hero whipping out his 1911 and putting all 8 rounds in the same hole at 200 yards. And I literally closed the book right there and set it down.
Well, you can't do 200 yards? I could do 200 yards, no problem.
I don't think the ammunition could group within 2 feet.
45 caliber doesn't go that
I read a very prominent author, and I think this has subsequently been taken out of one of his early books, very prominent author, who mentioned shrimping on the Rio Grande.
Oh.
And I lived on the Rio Grande, and yeah, there's no such thing as shrimping on the Rio Grande. And I don't know how that made it into a book. And it was a big book. So, yeah. So I think subsequent editions have removed that.
Yeah, so I've just tried super hard. You know, I've tried super hard to be accurate in the details so that whether you're reading it for the first time or whether you're a subject matter expert, you look at it and you say, oh, yeah, that's right. That's a pretty good little detail in there. And, you know, maybe 90% of the people don't catch some of the more subtle stuff. But for those who are educated and experienced, hopefully they'll appreciate it. So,
as a quick follow-up to that, can you give me some of the numbers of some of those?
Yeah. David, a lot of writers are introverts by nature, but find themselves being drawn out into the public eye either via social media or book tours or interviews like this and like crew reviews. Someone can embrace that aspect of the business. What about you? Do you enjoy it or do you loathe that part of being a writer?
So I'm a super private individual by nature. Like social media was never really my thing. And, you know, just online presence, not really what I'm after. But I do find the book tours to be a lot of fun. It's an adrenaline rush. I love going out and meeting all those people. I mean, I've got a huge tour planned for Black Flag. I'm doing my living room on Thursday, on Friday, and then the following Monday, I'm doing the dining room. So.
I got to get him by 11 o'clock to make that meeting.
Wait, are you wearing pants?
Not standing up. Sorry.
Don't stand up. Don't.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. My wife does all these Myers-Briggs tests for all of her potential employees. And I always come up right on the threshold between an INTJ and an ENTJ. So right on that introvert, extrovert threshold. So
that's probably the perfect spot for a writer, right?
It is. Where you're able to do this stuff, come out of your shell a little bit, and then just go right back into it.
Yeah.
Well, Somalia seems like a nice enough place to research for a book.
So my wife, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mike, but my wife actually said to me when I told her I was writing it, she goes, "Are you going to go?" I'm like, no, I'm not going to go. You should definitely go. And I'm wondering, like, are there extra insurance policies somewhere?
What did I sign yesterday? What was that?
We have a $7 million policy on you, David.
Right,
Go.
Just the show.
and it's doubled if something happens that involves piracy. So just a weird clause that we've added.
I already bought the ticket. Go.
Sorry, Mike. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's funny. How did you approach learning the landscape and the culture, the economic, the encompassing environment for that part of the world, since it's such a major setting for your latest book, Black Flag?
So I again, fortunate to have a close friend who was stationed in Africa for 8 years, and then a friend of a friend who spent a lot of time there. More recently, one military, one diplomat, intelligence, I guess diplomatic mostly. But so they were able to inform a lot of my information about Africa and sort of the way a lot of things happened and the personalities involved and all that. And then I just did a tremendous amount of research. Another friend owns a translation company, and he hooked me up with a Somali native who helped me with some specifics about, okay, how would this go down in Mogadishu? And so it was just some basic research.
So you didn't do Google Street View in Mogadishu?
Amazingly, it's not very good. In fact, I did do Google Satellite View, and it's like, if you could picture the highest or the lowest resolution map you've ever seen, that's what it's like. I think they took a pass from somewhere on Venus, one shot of Africa, and that's it for Somalia.
Dirt.
Or did you watch, was it Captain Phillips, the Tom Hanks movie?
I did watch it. Yeah.
Oh, Black Hawk Down. Yeah.
Or Black Hawk Down. Yeah.
Black Hawk Down I watched a long time ago. That was a great story. And, a couple of the guys I talked to, gave me a lot of color on that too. So,
dude, cool. you got a lot of contacts to use and abuse, bro. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe it's my imagination, but the thrillers I cut my teeth on, they had their stakes were probably just as high as the thrillers today, but the villains' plans were generally foiled, and tragedy on any significant scale was usually averted in the books that I grew up on. In your second book, Rogue Strike, the jumping off point is essentially a really, really horrible event that the size of 9/11, really, if you're talking death toll, and takes place in Mecca. So writing those scenes, did it give you pause to kill off 3,000 people as a starting point and wonder, can I keep the stakes up as I continue to go?
Yeah. Murderer.
Yeah, thanks.
You like it.
Jeez, wow. I didn't realize we were going to get into moral judgment here, but
yeah, sorry. You've entered the realm.
The stakes.
Only a book's gone.
It wasn't fiction, dude. I felt
Sean's got to kill 5,000 for his opening.
So the 3,000 number was tied in, and I was in Manhattan on 9/11, and it's a deeply personal event for me. I remember crossing Fifth Avenue and watching the towers on fire, and that was sort of the tie-in with the 3,000 as it comes out later in the book. There's a significance to that number, but it's not like I internalized it, or it was, I don't know. I don't really consider that to be a genuine loss of life. It was more so just to get the book started. And yes, to your point, that's a pretty big opening gambit to keep the pace up. But I felt that I tried to think of one of the most horrific events I could, and that was kind of where I landed.
Yeah.
Right.
I was fascinated because it hit me when I was kind of going through notes and such, that it seemed like all the movies, all the books that we grew up on, nothing bad ever really happened. They always stop it from happening before anything. And today's thriller is different. I mean, And it's not just you. I just thought of that as an interesting dropping off point. And I feel like it's like almost throwing yourself down the gauntlet that I have to make the rest of this book be just as terrifying or more terrifying than what I started out with.
Yeah, and I think that may be a function of a shorter attention span that we all have now.
So true.
And I remember I was reading a book on how to write a novel, and this guy's like, you should grab your audience in definitely the first chapter, ideally, the first sentence or the first paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
So you throw something out there, and you want to make the reader turn the page.
Yep.
Yeah. So, murdering people. So continuing on that, who do you have to kill to get Lee Child to blurb your debut Warning Light? And what is it like seeing a comment attributed to him on the cover of your little baby?
I lost my mind.
Yeah.
I had a really big grin.
Yeah, right.
I told Tom Colgan that I had planted a bomb in his house, and if he didn't get a blurb from Lee, I was going to detonate it.
I might use that one.
No, I mean, that's like we talked about earlier. Tom's a great guy. He's well liked, well respected in the industry, and he was great about reaching out to his contacts to get blurbs for Warning Light. And honestly, I was honored. I mean, I was giddy with gratitude by the big name authors who were generous enough with their time to read it. And I've really found that the whole community of writers is incredibly supportive. I come from a pretty competitive background, and I'm looking at all these people who are going out of their way to help other authors, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
We're dumbfounded by it. Well, not really, but we seriously, I've never experienced anything like that.
We've said this from day one.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Day one.
It's a great community.
And Sean's got an interesting take on the whole thing.
Yeah, I came from, I worked as a working screenwriter for 8 years, and that's a completely different industry. That's the industry where you stand in a room with 10 other screenwriters and nobody wants to talk about their idea because they're afraid you're going to steal it, or they're afraid that, hey, that producer is going to talk to you before he talks to me. So it's not like, and the other aspect, and we've talked about this with authors, you go to the movies on Friday, you're picking between movie A or movie B. Right. You go to the bookstore to get book A, and you say, oh, hey, I want B, C, D, and E too. And you leave with a stack of books. And it's just a completely different environment and mindset. And it's been super special for me to see up close.
Yeah. And Chris, to your point earlier about Lee Child, he is, for a guy who absolutely could sit back, rest on his laurels, and do nothing, he is such a supporter of the industry. And it's great to see. I think it sets a great tone for the rest of the industry. He just seems like a solid guy in terms of trying to help other authors get their start, including his brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Good stuff.
Well, let me, Sean, sorry about that.
Go ahead.
What did you read before you started writing? Who were your influences, and how, was that the impetus to go into this particular genre, or was that just your interest all along?
100%. Clancy DeMille Follett. So I'm dating myself there.
Oh, you're taking that's all the check marks.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we're all old. So,
some more than others.
I mean, Tom Clancy, I don't know if he created the genre or he was my first foray into the genre.
Right.
But Tom Clancy, some of Nelson DeMille's original books. I had the pleasure of meeting him just before Warning Light came out, purely by coincidence. I ran into him at a bar. Crazy.
Cool.
Right? But he's coming out of the men's room. I'm like, Mr. DeMille? And he said, call me Nelson.
Okay, Mr. DeMille.
But those guys like Ken Follett, just the body of work that those three men put out set the bar so high. I actually told Nelson DeMille that for years, you inspired me and intimidated me at the same time.
Right.
Because his work was so good. Yeah.
All right, with 3 fantastic thrillers under your belt, David, what's next? What do you got in store?
So I'm halfway through number 4 right now.
What's the title? What's the title? Can you tell us the title?
Can you read the first 10 pages for us?
The other thing I can tell you is that so far, Warning Light is the only title that I've actually come up with that's made it into print. The other one,
right? Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Black Flag was what?
That was Mr. Colgan, 100%.
No, what was your working title? Could you say?
Rogue Strike. It was called Better Than Tribute, which was the working title, and that comes from an old quote about the Barbary pirates, where I think it was President Madison said, we'll spend millions for defense, but not 1 penny for tribute. So, it's a little bit of a historical reference there, but maybe a little bit too esoteric for a book title.
I actually like it.
No, I like that, actually.
Yeah. And what was the first one? Or you say, which one was the one that Rogue Strike was yours?
Action became Rogue Strike.
Oh, okay. Rogue Action.
Yeah. All right.
I think Rogue
half
Strike.
right.
Well, can you tell us where book 4 takes?
Sure. So book 4 is a little bit of Jake cleaning some ghosts out of his closet. There seems to be something wrong in the Special Activities Center.
Nice.
And he's had this ongoing friction with his boss, which kind of comes to a head at the end of Black Flag. And he starts digging into that, and he enlists some allies he's made along the way. And at the same time, there's somebody's trying to kill him consistently throughout the book.
Okay. I like those stakes,
he doesn't
brother.
know why.
Yeah. Like it.
Sweet. So 2021 for that, right? Around this time next year?
Yeah, that'll be 2021. Yeah.
Fantastic.
All right.
And with that, you have survived the traditional portion of the interview. And now grab yourself a drink, because you're about to enter the bullet round. The lightning round.
formerly lightning round that we are trying very hard to get.
The round formerly known as lightning.
So, David, we're all gonna ask you, the 3 of us, we're gonna ask you a bunch of questions. Mine are gonna be word association. So whatever you hear, and then whatever comes into your mind, just blurt out.
All right.
All righty. First one is milk.
Dud.
He longs for the theater.
My second one is
seizure, right?
Yeah, right. Penguin.
Publisher.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Columbo.
One more thing, sir.
Oh, that's good. That's really good.
And finally, the last word association, Mike Houts.
Internet aficionado.
Okay.
Let's go with that.
I see. It's probably not a good way. I probably should have said Twitter. Instant Twitter responder. How's that? I feel like I know the 3 of you just from having been in this literary Twitter circle.
Isn't it? That's how
we should be spending more time.
Honestly, that's I think how we felt when we met. And that's why everybody was like, "Did you guys go to college together?" We're like,
yeah,
no. Our age range went from it was like 10 years apart at least from top to bottom.
It's like 29 to Mike.
39.
Yeah. Michael, you have some questions for David?
All right. The International Pirate Society has elected you, David, to develop a single flag to be flown by all pirates worldwide. What is the image you choose and why?
Definitely be a red flag,
okay,
which is the bloody flag.
Yep.
And there's a little piece in the beginning of the book which explains the difference between a black flag and a red flag.
Yeah.
And just for a little education, the black flag was the warning flag, and the red flag was flown when there was no quarter to be given. So it'd be red flag, and I think I'd have to put a cutlass on there. Maybe just one. Yeah. Okay. Maybe a skull.
No kittens or anything.
No kittens. Rainbows.
Labradoodle.
Maybe a leprechaun.
Oh. Okay, question number 2. Your publisher, Penguin Random House, decides to send you on a themed book signing tour involving a skiff and 4 other writers posing as fellow pirates. Who is in your boat?
Oh my gosh. Okay, 4 other writers posing as fellow pirates. I'd probably put Mark Graney up there.
Yeah.
He could man the machine gun. And he's just such a super nice guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Kills you with kindness.
Yeah, exactly. I'd probably put Nelson DeMille in there because he's hilarious and he could keep us entertained.
All right.
It's a good crew.
Brad Taylor, just because he's got some skills.
Mm-hmm.
And a 4th one, let me see. I think J. Todd Scott, because he's a super nice guy. He's got sort of the DEA background, and who knows, we might find some bales of weed while we're out on the water.
Might as well make a few extra bucks while you're out.
Imagine that.
It just fell under the boat.
Imagine Nelson DeMille smoking pot.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'd pay for that.
We should write this. This is good. All right. Question number 3. Well, I made a little extra room. Can I be in your boat?
Of course.
Yes.
He just got kicked out of our boat and he needs a place to stay.
I've been thrown off of the original boat. Oh, yeah.
Is that a crystal glass, Mike?
It is.
Wow.
It's not bad.
I see.
I'm terrified that I'm going to break it. It's going to fall off my desk.
My first question, it's 2 a.m. and you wake up for your watch on your sailboat is heading in the wrong way into a shipping lane. What do you do?
I go to the watch leader and say, "What the hell are we doing here?" and he says to me, "Well, Doug's coming down with hypothermia. We got a following sea that's about 12 feet and it's blowing from this direction. And I was afraid to jibe the boat." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me." I'm like, "Wake up the other crew." So we wake everybody up. We put the guy who was on the verge of hypothermia down below, get him warmed up. And then we turned the boat out of the shipping lanes. But we had been going into traffic. We were probably making 11 knots. And the ships that were passing us in the opposite direction were 900 feet, 1,100 feet, going 22, 25 knots.
They're not stopping moving.
It was just like this.
Yeah.
And we're basically the guy who's walking down the highway in the wrong direction in the middle of the night. Drunk. Dude. That's basically what we were. And I was like, "You got to be kidding."
You're like a bobber out there.
How scary is that, man?
2 a.m. too. So I get up, woken up for my watch and go up on deck. And it takes my eyes quite a while to adjust to the nighttime lighting and everything else. And, it's a cloudy night offshore. Might have been a little rainy even. And it took me a while to look at the GPS plotter and figure out where we were. And I'm like, that must be my eyes. I'm like, because it looks like we're going the wrong way through the shipping lanes.
I don't even know how that even happens.
No one would hear your screams out there.
Yeah. Disappeared.
So it was almost like, think of a divided highway, except there's no divider, but there's 3 lanes of traffic in each direction. And we just kind of coasted from the slow lane on one side to the slow lane on the other.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
did you have to turn around and go back through it to get on back on course?
I did a 90-degree turn and just shot right over to where we were supposed to be.
Jeez, man.
We had radar, so I mean, it's not like we were completely blind, but we were a relatively small boat. Most of those big ships, they tune their radar down enough so every big wave and everything doesn't show up on their radar. They're really not worried about hitting us so much. They're worried about hitting somebody else like their size.
Right.
So they might not have even noticed if they'd hit us.
You wouldn't even been a speed bump out there.
No, exactly.
So my next question is actually made more interesting by your conversation about research at Mogadishu that you had with your wife. So you were an adventurous soul, clearly. But what is the one adventure your wife looks at you and says, "No, David"?
Antarctica. We talk about it all the time. My kids
Why
and I,
should- no.
Why
my
would
kids
you
and
go
I
to
really want to
Antarctica?
go. My kids and I really want to go, and she has zero interest. She's like,
Wow.
no interest. Yeah.
Oh,
All right, my last question. As a former ski instructor, what was your worst experience you had giving a lesson?
Oh gosh.
Or a
he's got
bad
to pick
one?
Worst
4-year-olds?
experience giving a lesson. I think I had somebody who literally had zero physical coordination. There was zero improvement from the beginning of the lesson to the end of the lesson, and just could not fathom anything. I mean, there was there's a 0-degree incline and he would fall down, and there was a 3-degree incline and he would fall down, and there was no way to stop him from falling down. And I'm pretty tenacious myself, but I just kind of gave up. It was like, all right, you're hopeless.
well, you probably should recommend an MRI of his head or something instead, just to see if there's
Right,
anything up
maybe already
there.
had
Hmm.
And that, folks, is the end of the lightning round.
But he
David
survived.
Ricciardi,
I don't
you
get
have
that.
been a awesome guest, folks. Black Flag comes out May 19th, right?
Robbie.
Fantastic book. You're a fantastic writer. You're an awesome guest. Thanks, brother. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, guys. So much fun. Nice to meet you in person.
Cheers.
Sort of. Cheers.
COVID in person.
No promises. Hey, boys, David Ricciardi was just on the show. His latest book, Black Flag, comes out May 19th. It is fantastic. He's fantastic. The interview was fantastic.
Right.
I mean, there's really nothing else to say that other than everything is fantastic, boys. So let's raise a glass to David Ricciardi.
I like that fantastic stuff.
Fantastic guest, boys. Fantastic interview.
Good show, boys.
You're fantastic.
I know, right?